all the way my Savior leads me. Cheers each winding path I tread, gives me grace for every trial, feeds me with the living bread.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Chester ARP Church Devotional Podcast. I'm Clint Davis, your host. We have taken a 4-month break from May of this year, 2024. Now it is October the 1st. We're starting back. We're going to pick up where we left off, this new iteration of the Devotional Podcast. We're going to pick up by reading the events as John records them from the last week of Jesus' life. He enters Jerusalem on the Sunday. That's covered in John chapter 12. So we're going to pick this up in John chapter 13 and go from there. And so we're going to read together. This is what John records for us about the last meal that Jesus shares with his disciples, beginning in chapter 13, verse 1. Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with a towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? And Jesus answered him, What I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand. Peter said to him, You shall never wash my feet. And Jesus answered him, If I do not wash you, you have no share with me. And Simon Peter said, Then Lord, wash not only my feet, but also my hands and my head. And Jesus said to him, The one who has bathed does not need to wash, except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you. For he knew who was to betray him. That is why he said, Not all of you are clean. Now these words of Jesus, this story of Jesus, these events of Jesus' last Passover meal with his disciples are well known to many of us already as we read these words today. They are words that tell us of a story of how Jesus gets up from his place at the table, the head of the table, the master of the feast, as it were, the one who is hosting everyone else who was coming to the feast, kind of the head of the house, so to speak, here for his disciples. And as Jesus is hosting them, he gets up from his host role, or his host chair, and he takes a towel, wraps it around his waist, gets down on his knees, and begins to wash the feet of his disciples. Now, oftentimes we think about this, we think about in the context of Jesus being one who was willing to serve. The greatest among you is the servant, he would tell his disciples in Matthew and Mark's gospel, as they record that for us, that to be great you must be willing to serve. And Jesus here, the Lord of glory, the King of kings, willing to serve his disciples, willing to serve his people, those whom he has come to save. It's a very visible, as it were, a very visible demonstration of his love and of his desire to serve. And certainly we see it that way. Jesus washes his disciples' feet, takes the role of the servant in the house, gives up the place of authority, the host position, and takes on the position of the lowest person in the room and washes his disciples' feet. This image is not lost, and the meaning of this is not lost on Simon Peter. As Jesus washes everyone's feet, he comes to Simon Peter, and Peter says, Do you wash my feet? In other words, are you going to wash my feet too? And Jesus answered, What I am doing now you do not understand, but afterward you will understand. And Peter said, You'll never wash my feet because you're not, right, the servant. You're the Lord. Peter is the one who's already confessed that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. You are the Messiah who is to come into the world. Peter recognizes who Jesus is. He is the Lord of glory. He recognizes the wonder and the amazement of the person of God taking on human flesh and becoming a human for us. Jesus understands Peter understands all of that. He says, You're not going to wash my feet. In fact, I think Peter would be, if you were to ask him at this moment, he would say, No, I'm going to wash your feet. That's my job. Jesus says to Peter, if I don't wash your feet, you have no part of me. And Peter recognizes that if Jesus is determined to wash his feet, that he's going to allow Jesus not only to wash his feet, but to wash all of his body, because Peter wants to be a part of Christ and his community and his faith and his kingdom. He wants to be a part of the people of God above all else. And so Peter says, wash my whole body. And Jesus says to Peter, you're already clean. The one who's already had a bath doesn't need anything washed but his feet, right? You clean up and get ready to go to dinner at someone's house for the Passover, a ceremonial meal. Right? He's already cleaned and he's on his way. He's picked up dirt and grime along the way as he walked upon the dirty roads and with open-toed shoes on. And so his feet got dirty, but his whole body was already clean as he was preparing to partake of the Passover meal with Jesus and his fellow disciples. And so he is already clean, and Jesus says, you've already been cleaned. You need to wash that grime off. There's two things I want to note here as we wrap this up today. Number one, if we've been cleaned by the grace and mercy of God, we pick up dirt and grime throughout our lives daily as we walk through the world. We sin, we struggle with things, but our bodies are clean because Christ has cleansed us in his blood. And so we've got to have those feet washed as we pick it up on a regular basis. We've got to come to the Lord for that foot washing, but the cleansing of our bodies has already taken place. The cleansing of our lives has already taken place in the person of Jesus Christ. So we've already been cleaned by the grace and mercy of God. We have to be cleaned in our feet, the grime that we pick up, but we have been cleaned personally by Jesus already. And then the other thing that I would note here is that Jesus here gives an indication that not all of them are clean, and that there are those, there is at least one in that body who is not clean. We'll read about him tomorrow, but that is Judas, and Judas is going to betray Jesus. Jesus says, Judas has been with us all along. And there is a sense in which we gather from this passage that the community of the physical, visible community of God is going to contain those who are believers and those who are not believers, though we all come by the profession of faith. But the heart is what matters. Judas would have certainly said, yes, I am a follower of God, but we know his heart is a heart that is devoted to destruction. He is what we will know as the son of perdition. So listen, you guys take care. God bless you. Know that you've been cleaned by grace. Christ has served you. He loves you. He's given his life for you. And that there will be people who don't know the Lord, counted among the number on earth, but ultimately their actions will determine whether they are with the Lord or not. You guys take care. God bless you. See you next time.
You care.